Have you ever wondered why the people you loved the most were often the first to disappear when your life began to change? Why someone who once promised to stay forever slowly became a stranger? Why friendships that seemed unbreakable suddenly dissolved without explanation? Or why every time you finally felt secure, life quietly removed someone you believed you couldn't live without? Most people call it bad luck. Some call it betrayal. Others spend years blaming themselves, replaying every conversation, searching for the exact moment everything fell apart. They convince themselves that if they had spoken differently, loved harder, tried longer, perhaps those people would still be standing beside them today. But what if you've been asking the wrong question all along? What if the real question isn't, why did they leave? What if it's, why did life need them to leave before I could become who I was meant to be? Stay with me until the end, because there is one truth about loss that almost nobody realizes. And once you understand it, you'll never look at the people who walked away in the same way again. Human beings naturally believe that everything valuable should remain forever. We celebrate permanence. We fear endings. We mistake familiarity for destiny. But nature has never operated according to permanence. Every season gives way to another. Every leaf eventually falls. Rivers never cling to the water that has already passed. Even the stars you see tonight are part of a universe that is constantly changing. Yet when change reaches our own lives, we resist it with everything we have. We hold on, we negotiate, we beg, we chase. Not because those people are always meant to remain, but because they have become part of the identity we built around ourselves. This is where the deepest misunderstanding begins. Most people don't only lose another person, they lose the version of themselves that existed through that relationship. When someone leaves, it isn't only their absence that hurts. It is the collapse of the future you imagined with them. It is the routines that suddenly disappear, the conversations that never happen, the dreams that quietly dissolve, the identity that no longer knows where it belongs. That is why loss feels so overwhelming. It is not simply subtraction. It is transformation disguised as emptiness. Imagine trying to teach a bird to fly while it refuses to leave the nest. The nest once protected it, but eventually, the very place that ensured its survival becomes the place that prevents its growth. Many relationships are exactly like that. They begin as shelters. Over time, they become cages, not because the people involved are evil, but because growth changes the needs of the soul. One of the greatest illusions we carry is believing that everyone who enters our life has signed a lifelong contract. Perhaps they never did. Perhaps some people were always meant to introduce you to a particular lesson, awaken a hidden strength, or reveal a wound you never knew existed. Once their purpose was complete, life quietly continued its work. The tragedy is that we often mourn the ending while completely missing the transformation it created. Think back to someone you desperately wanted to keep in your life years ago. At that time, losing them may have felt unbearable. Today, can you honestly say you would still be the same person if they had stayed? Would you have developed the resilience you now possess? Would you have discovered talents that only emerged because you were forced to stand on your own? Would you have met the people who later changed your life if the previous chapter had never ended? Life has a mysterious way of closing one door without immediately opening another. And it is inside that uncomfortable hallway that people either grow or become trapped by the past. Most never notice this. They spend years staring at the closed door. Meanwhile, life keeps quietly building another entrance just beyond their field of vision. The greatest danger is not losing someone. The greatest danger is refusing to move after they've gone, because the longer you define yourself through what has ended, the less room you leave for what is trying to begin. There is another reason people disappear from our lives, and it is far more uncomfortable than most are willing to admit. Sometimes people leave because they were attached to a version of us that no longer exists. Perhaps they admired the people-pleaser, the version of you who never said no, the version who sacrificed peace just to avoid conflict, the version who apologized even when you had done nothing wrong. But something inside you began changing. You started respecting yourself. You began speaking honestly. You stopped accepting treatment that slowly diminished your spirit. Suddenly, the relationship felt different. Not because love disappeared, because unconscious agreements were broken. Growth often exposes relationships that depended upon your self-abandonment. The moment you stop betraying yourself, those relationships begin to tremble. Some survive, many don't. And that is not failure, that is revelation. One of the hardest lessons life teaches is this: Not everyone who loves you loves the person you are becoming. Some only love the version of you that made them comfortable. That realization hurts. But it also sets you free, because once you stop trying to fit inside other people's expectations, you finally create space to discover your own. This is why periods of loneliness often arrive immediately after profound personal growth. It isn't because life is punishing you. It is because your inner world has changed faster than your outer world. Your old relationships no longer fit. Your new ones have not yet arrived. You stand between two lives. Most people panic during this stage. They mistake the silence for abandonment. They rush back toward familiar people simply because familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar possibility. Yet every meaningful transformation contains a season where nothing seems to make sense. The caterpillar probably does not understand the cocoon. The seed buried beneath dark soil cannot yet imagine the tree. From the outside, both appear trapped. In reality, both are becoming something impossible to achieve without that temporary isolation. Perhaps your own loneliness has been misunderstood. Perhaps it is not evidence that life has forgotten you. Perhaps it is evidence that life is creating enough quiet for you to hear yourself again. Have you ever noticed that the loudest periods of your life rarely produce your deepest insights? Real understanding often arrives during silence, after the breakup, after the disappointment, after the friendship ends, after everyone stops calling. At first, the silence feels unbearable. Then something extraordinary begins to happen. You meet the person whose voice has been drowned out for years, your own. Without constant opinions surrounding you, you begin asking different questions. What do I actually want? What kind of life feels authentic? What dreams belong to me rather than everyone else's expectations? These questions are uncomfortable. They are also life-changing, because for the first time, your direction no longer depends upon who stayed. It depends upon who you are becoming. There is a hidden law that quietly governs every meaningful transformation. Before your environment changes, your identity changes. Life rarely sends new opportunities into a mind that remains emotionally attached to an expired chapter. The old story must loosen its grip, not because forgetting is necessary, but because carrying yesterday forever leaves no hands available to receive tomorrow. This is why healing is not about erasing memories. Healing is changing your relationship with them. The people who left no longer become evidence that you were unworthy. They become evidence that seasons end. Lessons complete themselves, botting, separate, and life continues inviting you forward. There comes a day when you stop asking why someone disappeared. Instead, you begin asking what part of yourself their departure awakened. That single question changes everything, because suddenly, loss is no longer the end of the story. It becomes the beginning of understanding. And once understanding begins, something remarkable starts unfolding. You realize that the universe was never only removing people from your life. It was quietly removing every attachment that prevented you from becoming the person your future has been waiting for. And perhaps that is the greatest truth hidden inside every painful goodbye. The universe never removes people simply to leave your life empty. It creates space. Space for new experiences, space for healthier relationships, space for a stronger identity. Most importantly, space for you to finally meet yourself without depending on someone else's presence to feel complete. One day, you'll look back at the names you once cried over, not with bitterness, not with regret, but with gratitude, because you'll realize they were never meant to stay forever. They were chapters, not the entire story. Some arrived to teach you self-respect. Some taught you forgiveness. Some revealed your deepest fears. Others showed you what love should never look like. And once those lessons were complete, life gently closed the chapter so another one could begin. The difficult part is that the universe rarely explains its decisions while you're living through them. Understanding almost always arrives later, months later, sometimes years later. You suddenly notice that the person you were desperately trying to hold on to could never have walked beside the person you've become today. Your values changed, your standards changed, your vision changed. And without realizing it, your entire life changed with them. That is why healing isn't about replacing the people who left. It is about replacing the belief that your happiness left with them. Because the moment you believe someone else's presence determines your peace, you unknowingly hand them ownership of your future. Real freedom begins the day you understand that your peace is an inside creation, not an outside possession. People can inspire it, support it, celebrate it, but they cannot become its source. The universe knows this long before we do. That is why it sometimes removes what we've mistaken for our foundation, forcing us to discover the foundation that has been waiting within us all along. So if someone has recently disappeared from your life, if a relationship ended, if a friendship faded, if someone you trusted walked away without explanation, don't rush to fill the silence. Don't immediately assume you failed. Instead, ask yourself a different question. What part of me is this ending inviting me to discover? Because every ending carries an invitation. Most people only see the loss. The awakened person eventually sees the doorway hidden inside it. Years from now, you may not even remember the exact words that broke your heart, but you'll remember who you became because they were spoken. You'll remember the strength you never knew you possessed, the confidence that grew from standing alone, the wisdom born from disappointment, the peace that arrived the day you finally stopped chasing people who were already walking away. And then you'll understand something that cannot be seen in the middle of heartbreak. The universe wasn't taking people away to punish you. It was protecting the future version of you. It was clearing paths you couldn't yet see. It was removing distractions that would have kept you attached to a life you were never meant to live. So let them go, not because they were unimportant, but because your future is more important than your attachment to the past. Trust that every goodbye has a purpose, even when its meaning remains hidden. Trust that every empty space is preparing for something new. Trust that every season of loneliness is shaping the strength you'll one day be grateful for. Because the people meant to walk beside the person you are becoming will never require you to become someone you're not. And perhaps one day, when your life feels fuller than you ever imagined possible, you'll smile at the memories that once made you cry. Not because they didn't matter, but because you'll finally understand they were never the destination. They were simply the bridge that led you to yourself.